FreshLearn has been amazing to work with. This online course stuff, it nearly killed me to do it, but you made the process so easy. And non-verbal communication is much more than just body language. It's your voice tones, it's the vocal variety, it's micro-muscle, micro-color changes in your faces, and your breathing. What humans don't realize is that we're registering this all the time. But people won't do complicated things. It's too hard. They haven't got time. That's their problem. I haven't got time to do all that stuff you talk about. Almost everything is ruled by, I'm not good enough, I'm not worth loving. So we resist change because we're scared it's just going to prove we're not good enough or that we're not worth loving. I'm unsafe in some way. So change is scary because we're not certain about it. We haven't done it before. We might look like an idiot. It says 3 positive comments to 1 negative in a workplace generates a positive work culture. So when you're interacting with others, so long as the ratio is 3 positive to 1 negative, it's usually a positive culture.
Welcome to the FreshLearn Creator Show. My name is Shirji and I'm here with Amanda Gore, keynote speaker, globally sought after, and an author of 2 books who has touched the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, speaking and writing about joy mainly, but also in general happiness, laughter, kindness, as well as the ability to see the good even when life is not so good. Is that a fair introduction?
Yeah, it is reasonable. I try to do that, Shajil.
Okay. So Amanda has spoken at some of the biggest corporations in the world, and she travels globally. She's from Australia originally. I've seen that you're not a resident of the US, is it?
I'm living here at the moment, but I'll be heading back to Australia at some stage.
Yes. And you basically speak at organizations across the globe, and you've been very, very active and also very sought after as well. And I would just like to start from there. How did you come into, because you were not in this profession, you weren't trained in this profession, and if I know correctly, when you were younger, you didn't even have any idea that there is a profession like this.
That's true. Yes, I started off as a physiotherapist, and I didn't even know you could be a speaker. I was doing a lot of training and I'd written a couple of books, and someone invited me to speak at a conference. And my memory of it, because it's a million years ago, was at like 20 people, and they had an MC, so it can't have been 20 people, it must have been more. And at the end of me doing my presentation, the MC walked up to me and said, "You should be a speaker." And I said, "What's a speaker?" And then I was incredibly lucky, Sir Gio, because he mentored me into the business. And he's still one of the, well, he's dead now, but he was one of the best speakers I've ever seen. He was phenomenal. So I was very blessed. I was mentored in by what I think is the best in the world.
That's
And
that's so
then,
beautiful.
as they say, the rest is history. And it just took off because he helped me such a lot.
But it still must have been a leap of faith, right, for you to go from such a different background into this. You must have had your doubts. You must have had some apprehensions, or did you just feel like this is what you were meant to do?
That's a great question. I don't know that I actually thought about it a great deal. I was young. I was probably not young compared with you, but I think I was maybe in my 20s, maybe my later 20s, I think. I can't remember because it was like 38 years ago, whatever that is. Maybe I was 30. And uh, I had never thought about anything different, really. I think back at that time, I must have been in a very present space. So what was presented to me, I just thought, oh, okay then. And he made it quite easy. I worked very hard for it as well. I honed my skills and studied a great deal to get better at what I was doing. And I suspect it's much easier to tackle something like that when you have a really great mentor guiding you. And so I worked part-time, so I didn't just cast my job aside and begin speaking. I was lucky enough that I could work part-time at one of my jobs, and I could spend the rest focusing on the speaking. But do you know, it's a great question. I have absolutely no idea how I went from part-time working to full-time speaking. But I suspect Ron, his name is Ron Tacky, Ron helped me. And before I knew it, I was really busy as a speaker. So I think it was a calling that I didn't know was a calling, and it was a blessed journey.
It was a calling, and also I feel that you were quite zen yourself, right? Because you were really present in the moment and you didn't give it that much of a thought, or at least you didn't let your fear hold you back at the time, because that's what most people do. And we can't blame people, that's the human nature. But then some people have what it takes to move beyond their fear and really be present in the moment. And it's wonderful to see that you did that, because if you hadn't, then the world would have missed out on such a wonderful speaker as yourself.
Do you know, like, are you the Dalai Lama reincarnated or something like that, Shajil? To be saying such a wise thing, because it is the fear. That's a lot of what I speak about now. It's the fear that stops people doing things. And to this day, I have to catch myself. We may cover this later on, but in case we don't, to this day, I have to catch myself with everything that happens that's unexpected or every decision I make to see how much fear is involved. For example, at the moment, I'm reapplying for an American visa and the government shutdown is on. And of course, this is topical to just this moment. But I've had to look carefully at myself, at the fears that are coming up around it, because we emanate what we think. Others can read our thoughts. That's part one. The second part is that our thoughts literally are frequencies that go out like a radio station and resonate with others or can create possibilities. So if we focus in on what can go wrong and all the stuff we could be fearful about, then there are many layers that on an average day we don't think about in terms of those fears creating potentials that may not exist if we stayed. And people listening to this go, well, you can't have your head in the sky and just ignore all the things. Well, you can't. You can be prepared, but not fearful. And that's a very fine distinction. And it's also, fear is also very sneaky. Every time you go to make a decision, you want to make very sure that you've looked at all the little nooks and crannies inside you to see if there's an element of fear held in the decision. Because if you make a decision based on fear, then it will come back to bite you on the bum or the butt if you're in America.
Surely, surely. And what you've just said, also, I think I do read quite a bit of the Eastern philosophy, and I can find a lot of sort of common ground, right? I was just wondering how much, because I've read somewhere that you do believe in a personal or spiritual God, not in the very typically religious way, but you do believe in a spiritual kind of a God. So I was wondering how much of the Eastern kind of philosophy has affected your way of, or has influenced your way of thinking. The Zen philosophies or the very ancient Chinese kind of philosophies, which cover all these subjects a bit more explicitly than the more organized kind of religions do.
Well, I'm 71 and I've studied my whole life. And so I started off at 21 reading Wayne Dyer's book, Your Erroneous Zones, which started me off on that kind of trajectory. And then, I spent a little bit of time exploring Buddhism, and I studied Qigong for 7 years and became a qualified as a teacher. I haven't ever taught it, but I qualified as a teacher in it. And I have recently been studying the books of a man called Paul Celic, which I find a fascinating blend of, I don't even know how to describe it, kind of Eastern philosophy, but religious concepts, but they're not religious. They're just presented in a way that resonate with me entirely. And I suspect, I now believe, I have faith that there is something bigger than us, and that there's also our bigger selves, our higher selves, and that the core purpose is for us to remember that we are astonishing beings of light. We're not just, your little kind of normal pedestrian human walking around. We're in that vessel, but we're astonishing beings of light that have amazing capacities, and that the three core fears that stop us recognizing and remembering who we are that I'm not worth loving, or I'm not good enough. And these are, by the way, embedded by the time we're 7, based in epigenetics. I'm unsafe in some way, and I'm separate, I don't belong, I don't fit in. Well, if you look at quantum physics, which I've also studied, we're never separate. And so it seems to me that our life purpose, and we're all searching for the purpose of what's my purpose, what's my purpose? Well, I really, really believe that the purpose is to learn to love ourselves and have compassion for ourselves. And as we do that, we can really have love and compassion for others, and have the ability to receive love and compassion. And so to me, it's like life is a journey of moving from fear and separation to love, connection, and compassion, which sounds, kind of airy-fairy compared with some of the stuff I've talked about. But isn't that the philosophy pretty much of every religion, theology, belief system?
Or even cut.
They all
Yes.
say the same thing.
Yes. True, definitely. And I think what you've just spoken about is even more relevant today, or I suppose it's becoming more relevant today in this onslaught of AI that we have now, because everybody is now not just talking about AI, but also AI agents or AI driven people, so to say. So I've heard and seen some of your talks recently where you were talking about how we are always will always be better than AI. So I suppose that what you just said can segue nicely into this topic as well. So if you would like to enlighten us on that subject, I'm just trying to bring you to that topic of you've spoken about, and I really do admire your faith in human beings and the qualities that make them human, right? Um, I'm just trying to kind of connect it with this very recent kind of topic of AI, not just in a negative way, but overall.
Yeah. Because everybody was talking about AI, I thought, oh, well, I better have a topic on AI. So I called it the real AI, which I say is awareness inside. Because, and for those of you who are listening, if they're corporate types or they're CEO types, this applies so much in the corporate world, because Harvard has been writing forever that self-awareness is one of the key qualities of a great leader. And so if you want to progress up the leadership ranks, you need to have that self-awareness and to be a great leader. Because without self-awareness, well, let me backtrack a bit, because in epigenetics, we know that 95 to 99% of the time, we're literally unconscious of what it is that we're thinking or feeling, a lot of us. And I put my hand up for that one. It took me forever to realize I wasn't feeling, and it's taken forever to learn how to feel. So the real AI is that awareness inside. That's piece one. The second is that the human heart is a technology that is so sophisticated and so miraculous that AI will never replace it. Never. It might be a substitute in some small way in some areas, but it will never replace the capacity the human heart has to generate a field. So AI is based on electric current, therefore it will emit a magnetic field, but goodness knows what qualities are in that field. However, the heart, it's interesting because there's a place called the Institute of Heart Math that has done an enormous amount of research on the heart. They're all engineers, so they're kind of hardcore scientists. And they've proven that because the body is a giant bioelectric current, every organ in the body generates its own electric current. That's how we think, even. And so we have neurotransmitters that take little electric currents from one nerve to another, and they jump. And so the heart beats an electric current 60 times more powerful than any other organ in the body. And it generates this magnetic field that goes 6 feet out from the body in a sphere around our body. So if you think of the little human, and then this ball of energy around it, that's the heart field. And they have discovered at Heart Math that if you have an angry, hostile heart, first of all, it's a really bad thing for yourself because it's the number one predictor of heart attack. It's not anger, it's not smoking, obesity, and all stress and all the other things that we normally link with heart attack. It's actually the number one predictor, angry, hostile heart. However, if you have an angry, hostile heart, apart from the fact you're slowly killing yourself, and so you should really work on forgiveness of yourself and others, what happens is that the waves, if you like, that are emitted in this sphere actually interfere with the brain waves of anyone within that 6-foot sphere. So there are palpable impacts from the qualities that are in the heart. Well, this is the third part of it. Humans haven't changed in the last 1,000 years at least. That we have not changed. All of us want to feel seen, heard, valued, acknowledged, and cared for. I mean, I don't know one human, maybe a sociopath. A sociopath probably got to be a sociopath because they didn't get seen, heard, valued, acknowledged, and cared for. So humans haven't changed. AI can pretend it cares for you. I know chat says to me, "Oh, great idea, Amanda. Thanks for pointing that out to me." But after it said that about 3 times, it's weird. It's like, ew. It's not the same as a human connecting heart to heart with the two spheres interacting.
Yes, yes.
So I don't think AI, it will become very sophisticated and it will be very useful. But I don't know about you, Shadil. Sometimes I've used AI for a lot. If I've used it for maybe an hour doing some research, it changes how I feel. I have to leave it and go out in the sun and ground or do something because sometimes it's not quite right. So be conscious of that. I don't know. Have you noticed it?
I have, especially now that we have quite a lot of content being generated by AI, including articles and videos. It does seem exciting in the beginning when you watch or read something and you think, wow, it's able to do that. 2-3 years ago, it was not able to do that. But then you get sort of, after a point, like you said, you start to feel, I don't really like this, right? I appreciate that AI can do this, but I'm not liking it. Something's missing. And probably, just like you pointed out, that something that is missing is that genuine human heart or the quality of being human, which just shows whether it's a video or it's an article or even if it's a small social media post. When it's written by AI, you could tell, right? It'll be all neat and clean and nice, but you could tell that it's generated by AI.
And it's not just the big dashes, that give it away.
It's
And certainly it does make writing more concise and precise. But there's a lot of young people, I believe, who are just using it and not really modifying it. If you don't put your own sense of self into it, then it shows. Here's the other thing. I studied with a man called Michael Grinder for at least 30 years. And Michael is, I believe, the world's leading authority on nonverbal communication. And nonverbal communication is much more than just body language. It's your voice tones, it's the vocal variety, it's micro muscle, micro color changes in your faces, and your breathing. What humans don't realize is that we're registering this all the time. The unconscious is picking it up constantly and giving us clues about the other person. Like, you walk into a room and you don't see anybody, and you don't hear anything, but you know something's wrong. And you say to someone when you see them, "What's wrong?" And they say, "Nothing." And big stuff is wrong. And you try to find out what it is. So there's that human element again of the non-verbal communication that AI is never going to pick up. Well, not at this point anyway. But even if it did, unless humans split into two different categories, ones who become more robotic and they don't encapsulate the human qualities we all have, and they diminish those, then AI can never replace what another loving human can be. That just came to me. Because if you're a cruel human, maybe AI is going to do kinder things, but it's never going to be interacting with you at that energetic field level. So in terms of quantum physics, we're all one. We're all connected all the time. And the example I use there is if you're sitting at your desk and you suddenly think, "Whoa, I haven't heard from Mary or John for the last couple of weeks. That's unusual." That within about a day max, Mary or John calls you or reaches out or emails or texts, because we're all connected. We're just not conscious of it. And that's why awareness inside, that self-awareness, is so important.
That brings me onto the topic of books, I suppose, because what you just said reminded me of the book Think and Grow Rich, which I read probably when I was 19. And I was really fascinated to see that this kind of research into neuroscience was going on even more than 50 years ago. I suppose even 75 years ago, but it wasn't just popular at the time. Today, we could see it in some social media snippets or small kind of posts. We could see a couple of paragraphs somebody shares on Instagram or something, but at the time it was really just research that was the sort of the privilege of only scientists to know at the time, right? And then Think It Grow Rich was among those first few books that sort of started talking about it, about how you sort of change what you do and how you are by how you think. And it's not just all woo woo, because there is actually science behind it. So I
Yeah.
was wondering, how do you separate reading for pleasure and reading to learn, Amanda? Do you separate them? Because I am sure that you've read thousands of books, but do you just read for pleasure, or do you read for learning, or do you have a clear separation, or is it just mixed?
Again, great question, because I haven't even thought about it. I used to read voraciously um, when I was younger, and I read everything. I used to love Egyptian mythology when I was younger, and books about Africa, and just as a young kid, learning about everything. And then I think I probably progressed into a whole lot of self-help books and novels, because I love there are various authors that I would, "Oh, I love this," like binge watching a TV program, I suppose. I would binge read. And more recently, that's a great question. I have not read a novel for about a year. I love Isabel Allende's books because they're so rich and beautifully written. Um, and I'm confession, I'm terrible with mysteries because I can't put a book down. I have to read the end of the book to find out what happened. So it says a lot for me that I'm still working on, where I need to know the outcome. But the books are so exciting. They're like reality for me. But more recently, I have been reading Paul Selig's work, and I think it's and other books like that. So I would say in the last couple of years, the vast majority have been books to develop my and deepen my understanding of how we operate so that I can find a way to teach complex concepts in a more simple way. For example, just recently, I speak about the bell curve. You know about the bell curve? How it's shaped like a bell, in case somebody's watching that hasn't heard about it. And at this end are the very successful, so called successful people. At this end, the not so successful, and the vast bulk of people fall into the average category. So I've started calling these the A's and the B's. These are the C's and the D's, and these are the F's, because people can relate to those sorts of categories. And that we all slide between the three, but wisdom starts to come with self-awareness. And when we consciously choose, when we consciously recognize we're down at this end, oops, having a human moment of fear, because down here is fear and judgment and blame and excuses. And it pretty much sucks to be down here. And up this end is the joy and love and compassion and self-care and self-awareness. So this doesn't mean become a selfish nerd, but it does mean care for yourself so that you have enough energy to care for others. So the path or the tool for moving from this end up to this end, and then noticing that we've slid back, is self-love. So when you notice you're down at this end, instead of going, I did that again, you idiot, how could you do that? Here we are judging, blaming. It's to have a little giggle maybe and go, oh, slipped into my human self there for a bit. So I'm just going to love myself back to joy, compassion, self-love, and self-awareness. So it becomes a useful little tool that has emerged from the reading I've done and some interviews with people I've had that I've learned from. And so I suspect that's where I am at the moment. And I listen. It's interesting because when I used to read voraciously, there weren't many podcasts. In fact, there were none. But now I do listen to a lot of podcasts as well. So I guess that kind of substituted some of it.
Do you have any favorites? Do you have like 5 or 10 podcasts that you couldn't do without?
Gosh, no, not that many. Mind you, they're all a bit esoteric right now. And you know, we all go through this, I think, Shajil. You know, you get to different phases in life. And well, that's the way I've worked anyway. And I kind of focus in on one thing and then I'll unconsciously morph to the next thing and then the next thing. So at this phase in my life, I've been listening to the work of Paul Celic and a woman called Kerry Kay. They're all a bit esoteric type things, but I feel like that's probably because I studied psychology. We had a major in psychology when I was at university, so it's like 50 years ago, and I did a lot of the traditional psychological stuff to begin with. So I suspect this is, and then stuff in the middle. This is a bit of going to the other end and then merging the two. And so Oracle Girl's another one I listen to. And then there's one or two on The Diary of a CEO. I can't remember the others.
Okay. I was reading Luke Gerstner's book on the IBM turnaround, and I saw one of your testimonials. He's also from Luke Gerstner. So I thought, wow, that's great. It must have been quite a learning experience for you as well, having spoken at so many different and such large organizations that you've touched the lives of everybody from CEO level, C level executives, from CEOs to, I'm assuming very young professionals who are just beginning their careers now, when you are yourself, about 70. How do you see things changing in the corporate world, or do you see anything changing in the corporate world? Do you think, again, I'm asking without any kind of malice, but do you think things are getting better, or do you think things are getting worse in the corporate side of things?
I don't know that I'd label it as better or worse because they're all so
So I
different.
have a less joy in the office.
Uh, well, yes, yes, definitely. I think less joy. But if you look at the global situation of uncertainty, there is no question the world is going through some kind of massive change. It's changing at a societal level, it's changing at a corporate level. The earth herself is shifting with earthquakes and floods. And so, probably the biggest change I've seen is an enormous escalation of fear since COVID, which is destructive in more ways than I can begin to describe. And then you add the uncertainty. So COVID placed massive fear and intense separation into the field. So now we're dealing with that fear and that sense of separateness and, like, oh, no, I can't shake your hand. So we disconnected humans. And because they had to be 6 feet apart, we made sure their hearts didn't interact. So there's still that, I was going to say remnant, but it's much bigger than a remnant in the situations, every situation. And then we have the uncertainty. So the uncertainty of, is work going to keep going? And we're having to do more with less. So there's a whole lot more burnout. But then, of course, we've got the human element and we have perceptions. I thought I was so clever at one stage. I came up with this term perceptonomics. And, I trademarked it and thought it was just going to be fabulous. And I would say it to people and they go, huh? But the truth is, life is not about reality. We don't see reality. We perceive and we judge what we perceive. We interpret it. We give it meaning. And then we create expectations out of it. So we're kind of living in this world where we have all the different generations with different expectations and different ways of perceiving. But having added all of those or listed all of those, Shajil, who are we leading? It's humans. And it doesn't matter what age the human is, whether they're a Gen Z or Z, a millennial, or a baby boomer. Do you know one human that doesn't want to be seen, heard, cared for, acknowledged, and whatever the other word was that I used before? That we just all want to be loved and cared for. There's actually a wonderful book called Everybody Matters by, oh no, his name's just dropped out of my head. Darn. Anyway, he's the CEO of Barry Waymiller, which is a manufacturing company. God, what is his name? Anyway, if you look up Everybody Matters and you see that he's the CEO of Barry Waymiller, BarryWehmiller, it's an extraordinarily successful global company. And I believe that they've been so successful, apart from great leadership, but they have a credo that is, we are developing great people to do extraordinary things. And with that philosophy as a guiding principle to everything they do. They now have a leadership university teaching how to do this and implement their strategies. It's a wonderful, wonderful philosophy. And I spoke with the gentleman whose name is on the tip of my tongue, but I can't get it. And no matter what the world economy is like, no matter what the planet is doing, we're still interacting with humans. And we just, if I say we have to operate from love, there'll be a whole lot of corporate people go, "Whoa, we can't just do that. You know, got to have strategy and print and processes and techniques." And yes, you do. But who implements all of those? Humans. And if they're engaged, it means they feel cared for, that they're growing, they're developing, they're seen, they're acknowledged, they're valued. That was the word I left out. And they will implement the strategies and the tools that you have. But if they're disengaged and they're disconnected, and the number one problem that every client from every category of organization I speak to has said for the last probably year is finding great people and keeping them.
Sure, sure.
It's one of their number one problems.
Yes, yes, yes. But I also believe, and I'm saying this without Melissa, and I'm really sorry to interrupt Amanda. I do think that there is, the a kind of a culture now where people are finding it hard to trust corporations because of this, a kind of there is no loyalty from the side of the corporations, right? They keep laying people off, and so people have come to this in sort of maybe your generation, there was the concept of loyalty, sticking with one
Yeah.
job, an organization, one company, one group of colleagues for your life, maybe. But today, that seems like a very silly idea, and even the most intelligent people don't really ascribe to it because they say that the examples are right before you. The biggest corporations in the world are laying off their best talent because they keep changing their policies or because of some economy, and now they're investing in AI, so there are massive layoffs everywhere. And so the best talent, they do not anymore see an organization as their home anymore, or the colleagues as their family. And yet all corporations want all their employees to do just that, right? So there is this bridge, and how is that going to be reconciled? I'm not sure. I'm sure that you know the answer to that better, and you at least you talk about it. But I'm also wondering, don't you face resistance, both from sort of the side of the management and the side of the employees? Don't you have people coming up to you after your talks and say, "But Amanda, but this, but that," because at the core of your message, I'm sure nobody disagrees, but they'll all have their own quite kind of objections, right? Or some kind of an exception. They'll say, "But this, but that." So any interesting ones, and how do you deal with them? What do you answer to them?
No, you are a very wise young man. I'm sure you were something like the Dalai Lama before. Um, the most common objection is just time. But everybody is so aligned. Well, that speaks to me anyway. The ones that hated me have, left and they're bitching about me in a corner somewhere. But the ones I speak to are generally reminded of what's important, and they go back to do it. Let me give you a kind of a sideways answer. My ex-husband, who's now one of my best friends, his name is Ken Wright. He wrote a wonderful book called The People Pill. You should interview him, actually. And he, when I met him, was one of the best leaders I've ever come across. He didn't even go to college. He got an honorary college degree because he ended up being CEO of the financial services division of Australia's biggest bank. And he never went to college, and he started as a bank teller when he was 16. But he's a genius with people. One of the things he used to do, he used to call them coffee chats, but I renamed them happiness chats. He would take each one of his direct reports out once a month for a coffee, and they would have a chat about what's going right, what might not be going right, and could he help? How could he support? What did the person need to do? And this was one of his strategies. There's another one that's pure genius, but it would take a bit too long to describe. But this little happiness chat did not take very long, and was a way of engaging the person and keeping them engaged, so they did feel that they could trust the leadership. Because you're quite right, there's a loss of trust in the corporation, but really, who is the corporation? It's the CEO and the VPs and the next level and the next level. Careful, we go back to perceptions. If you trust your boss, and your boss trusts your boss's boss, and so on, then we have a culture of trust and a culture of engagement. And those happiness chats really helped. In terms of the younger generation's perceptions, you're quite right. There's no way they would stay with the one company forever. I wouldn't stay with any company forever now if I was starting again. But there is something to be said for staying in a job long enough to work through some difficulties instead of having a couple of difficulties and going, oh, no, screw it, I'm moving. Because you build resilience and you build the skills to interact with other humans. Because the difficulty in most jobs that causes people to leave is that it's communication skills. It's whether you collaborate or not. It's whether you get on with colleagues or not. It's what the culture is like. If it's a toxic culture, then go, run, don't walk. But who creates the culture? It's the leader. And it's the self-awareness of the leader and the awareness of others. So one of the things I say, the most important thing in life is how you feel about yourself. Because when you feel good about yourself, you can deal with anything. And things are much smaller problems. Things that would normally be massive problems if you felt badly about yourself are tiny if you feel good about yourself. The second most important thing in life is how others feel around you. Now, you're not responsible for how others feel, but you are responsible for the field, if you like, that you emanate, the environment that you create for other people to be in. And so I say a leader's job is threefold. The first is to help people believe in themselves, because belief in your own ability is a better predictor of success than any level of skill. The second is to create an environment in which people can be the best they can be. So it's joy-filled, fear-free. And the third is to change people's behavior, to help them grow and develop. And you can do that in a heartbeat if you tell them a story that touches their heart. You can't just give them figures and facts, because figures and facts will never hold up to a belief. So the concept of it's perceptions on both sides of the generations. And younger people are quite happy, well, people, not just younger, are happy to work in a culture that's a great culture, that's nourishing, that's encouraging, that's rewards them, that acknowledges them, that allows them to innovate, gives them freedom to create. And we say that's a corporation, but really that's a leader. It's the boss that allows you to do that or not. So they're choosing to go with a great boss. And then if you take the layoff principle, that is, again, the senior leadership. And it does erode trust in the entire nature of corporate life. So whether it's driving people back to smaller business, which might be a bit less influenced, but who knows? See, that kind of takes me back to the uncertainty and the economic instability right now. So yes, they're losing trust in the corporations, but that's really a reflection of the uncertainty of the global economy.
That's been happening since the COVID time. Yeah. last 5 years have not been easy on anybody.
No. And recognizing that, and recognizing the specifics of why. So here's the other piece too that I think is valuable for people to hear. We can choose to look at a challenge as, oh my God, what am I going to do? Which is the normal reaction. Or once we got past that bit, to say, wait, okay, how can I consciously choose? Because remember, 95 to 99% of the time we're unconscious of what we're thinking. How can I consciously choose to see this as an opportunity? How can I choose to be a good finder? And that's part of what's in the program. And I know it sounds simple, but people won't do complex, sophisticated things. It's too hard. They haven't got time. That's their problem. I haven't got time to do all that stuff you talk about. So if you pick simple things, how hard is it to say stop, reflect, stop, take a breath, stop the panic, and go, okay, how can I find something good in this? So, for example, something just happened to me with the government shutdown. So I have reapplied for a visa 7 months ago, and I paid to have it fast track, but with the government shutdown, it's still kind of in limbo. So something happened about me traveling that I couldn't. And I did go to, not to the same level as I normally would, but I did go to the, oh God, what am I going to do? Oh, I'm not sure I pack my bags now. Well, and then after I slapped myself a bit, like practice what you preach, I came to a place of peace where I accepted and surrendered that I had done everything I could. There is nothing else that I can do. There is obviously some deeper purpose. I'm choosing to believe there is some deeper purpose in this that I don't know, that I'm not aware of, and I will surrender to the process. Now, for those of you who are objecting to that piece I'm choosing to believe because it brings me peace, and I can settle and not live in a state of fear. That has worked very well for me, to find something good in what's happening. It's not what I would prefer to have happen, but I'm finding something good in it. It gives me that opportunity to practice surrender, which then gives me peace. And if you choose to always either find something good or see a challenge as an opportunity, then everything in your physiology changes. And the Chinese have that philosophy. You know, the Chinese character for, what is it, chaos, is also the same character for opportunity. It's something very similar to that. I don't think that's exactly it. But so again, that's not a new philosophy.
It is not at all. Yes. Do you believe there is anything new under the sun?
Well, AI, I guess.
Okay.
When it comes to the human heart,
So,
probably not. And human growth and development.
yes. Yes. So if we talk about your book, which is in its second edition now in 2014 or 15, you sort of rewrote the book that you had written and released about 10, 15 years ago. And you have added more pages to your book. It went from 280 to 350, is it? So I just want you to...
Oh, you're good at research.
I just wanted to understand, what would you tell people? How would you sell your book, right? Because somebody who hasn't heard of you or hasn't read you, but is really interested in reading you, what would you say what's in this book? Because there are so many self-help books out there today, and
It's true.
that is true. But I do think that the way you are really focused on the subject of joy, that's really interesting. And I'm also sort of, in a way, curious why joy, because there's so much else, right? Um, in self-help, so to say.
Well, I didn't pick joy. I just
You found
kind
it.
of woke. Yeah, I woke up Well, I don't know. There was a period of time there where I just knew I had to write a book on joy, but I couldn't write it. I had no problem writing books. I'd written, I don't know, 4 by then. I never had a problem writing a book, but I knew I had to write it, but I couldn't write it. I couldn't write it. I'd sit down, I'd try, I couldn't write it. So my mother died. Now, there's a bit of a bizarre story, so it might put people off, but it might put some people on. And she had just died, and I was very close to my mum. And I woke up one morning either and had this vision, or it was a very vivid dream. But I dreamed that my mother was there, and she said to me, I'm going to put together a writing committee for you, and you're going to sit downstairs and meditate, and we will download the information into you. And I'm like, what? Nothing like that had ever happened to me before. But I couldn't write the book, so I thought, well, I'll try. So I went downstairs and I meditated for about 20 minutes. And blow me down, Shajil, I went and I wrote about 35 pages. It just went like this. My fingers were going over the keyboard. I could hardly keep track of the words. And the book was written in about 5 or 6 weeks, I think. And I don't know that it's all that different from a whole lot of self-help books, but I had written such a lot of them. I wanted something that would give people a consistent series of little itty-bitty easy activities that would rewire their brains for joy if they kept through it. Now, the definition of joy, most people, when they hear joy, it's like, whoa, everything's so great. But really, it's interesting because the last chapter of the book, I typed equanimity. And I had to change it because nobody knew what equanimity was. I had to change it to inner peace. And interestingly, it's twice the length, that's where the extra length comes in, of the other chapters. But it is almost a complete summary of the other 11 chapters, which is fascinating to me. I mean, I was just kind of typing, and each chapter has got 7 little daily exercises or activities. For example, the being a good finder one. You know, your task today is to go forth and find the good in at least 5 things. Or if something bad happens to you, find some good in it. And each tiny little exercise like that, when you do it, reinforces a rewired pathway in the brain. Let's use bicycle riding for an example. First time you ride a bike, it's, you're a little kid and you fall off, and each time, so the first time you do a new activity or have a new thought or behave in a different way, it's like there's a tiny little scratch on your brain, on the surface of the brain. Each time you do that same activity, the little scratch gets deeper and deeper and deeper until it becomes a groove. And then you get to a point where it's automatic because the groove is so deep, you don't require any more conscious thought for the impulse to go through it. That's why it's so hard to break a habit, because you've done the thing so often, so long. It's like a chasm in the brain. And the way to stop, to undo the habit, first of all, you've got to catch yourself going down the pathway of the chasm. And as you catch yourself, you go, oh, and you pull yourself back. The more you catch yourself, the less you go down that well-trodden chasm, the more the chasm starts to fill in and become shallower. The less you do it, the shallower, the less, until it fills in. And that's not a habit anymore. That's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but essentially.
So there's a science behind it.
Yeah.
Yes. I do see quite a lot of, for example, the book Atomic Habits. There has been quite an explosion in research and books that have come out. on this very subject of developing habits? Probably because that's something that everybody struggles with, because we all know our potential is higher than where we are, but we all sort of struggle to get there, probably because of self-doubt, or maybe because there is some kind of a resistance also from within to change, which again is natural. But then the ambition to be better than what you are is also natural. So there's always this pull from two sides.
Yeah. Can I just make a comment, Shajil? When you were saying about the resistance to change, almost everything is ruled by I'm not good enough, I'm not worth loving. So we resist change because we're scared it's just going to prove we're not good enough or that we're not worth loving. I, I'm unsafe in some way. So change is scary because we're not certain about it. We haven't done it before. We might look like an idiot. Faux what? Fear of what others think. And then that we're separate, we don't belong. If I change, I won't fit in. Sorry, I just had to throw that in.
No. That's very much what I was also talking about. I was only wondering, um, uh, you believe in exercises, right? So, if, for example, somebody wants to be uh, somebody wants to be a joyous person, or somebody really wants to be a good force, a positive force in the world, including in their corporate setup, right? Where it could be a bit harder than usual. You could be nicer at home, but the same person could be a lot meaner at work, because sometimes you just feel like people around you are mean, and so you have to be. So how does a person deal with, how does a person who wants to be good deal with people who are difficult, people who are not allowing them to be nice or joyful? Sometimes people, a senior colleague is cross with you for no fault of your own, and in that moment you feel, again, you feel like you're not worth it. Maybe it's your own fault, or you feel like, I'm just going to give it back. I don't deserve to be treated like this. But what would be the right way, and what would be the mental exercise that people need to handle such situations and still not lose their, as you put it, their light?
Every situation is so different, but let's just use the global one. You get somebody who's unhappy at work. We know they're going to be unhappy with themselves. Their boss has been crappy to them or has just called them out. They have their own wounds, which will be one of those three core fears. Sometimes, I, let me draw something for you, if I can find a piece of paper easily and you can see it. So Michael Grinder taught me this. If you, oh no, I'll just do it like with my hands. So imagine you've got three chairs in a row. Chair, chair, chair. In the stick chair at the front is the behavior of the person. The stick chair behind that is the fear that's driving that behavior. So remember this if you have children as well, because those core fears are embedded by the time we're 7, one or more of them. So whichever one resonates with you, that's the one to work with. So we've got the behavior, the fear driving the behavior. Behind the fear chair is the need or the value that if you feel, the fear goes away, the behavior changes. So if you go into self-awareness and awareness of others, you can, presumably you would know your boss well enough to work out, okay, is it they don't feel good enough or they're not worth loving? Is it they feel unsafe? Or is it that they're separate, they don't belong, they don't fit in? Well, you can rest assured it's probably number one, because almost everybody has that one. It's like the human condition. And I haven't gone into the depth of how we get those fears, but that's in the book. There's a story that we as toddlers tell ourselves. So truly, we are all dealing with toddlers in grown-up bodies. So if you remember, you're dealing with a toddler in a grown-up body. The toddler probably feels unsafe or unloved. With self-awareness, you understand that, and you can choose to behave in ways that either feed the anger or in some way you can find something good about that person, focus on the good thing. You don't have to speak it out loud, just focus on it. If you want to say something positive out loud, you can do that. But because that Think and Grow Rich, because the thoughts are frequencies, just focusing on something good about that person changes the dynamic. So
That is a great answer. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I love that answer.
great. Because everything you think is emanating out. They don't know what they're picking up, but they're picking up something. So if you're here going, well, you asshole, who are you to speak to me like that? Blah, blah, blah. You wouldn't say it out loud, but this is what you're projecting to them. They pick that up and boom, you get more of it. But just remember, you are dealing with toddlers in grown-up bodies and they're wounded. And if you have the self-awareness and the maturity to rise above it, and you feel okay about yourself. But you see, if you're feeling badly about yourself, let's say you did do something, or you could have done something a bit better, and the boss goes, war, if you have any kind of fear, you'll respond with that. And now you're in this sword match of fear swords fighting each other. Did that answer it to some degree?
That is a great answer. I love that answer. It also reminds me of a question that I should ask you, because you said that we are all toddlers in adult bodies. Just a very short question. Freud or Jung?
Oh, gosh. Do you know? I never studied either of them deeply. You are way smarter than I am. They're far too intellectual.
You can't avoid reading about them, right? Even if you haven't gone and taken that painful journey into reading all of their work.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it either, but you can't avoid hearing about them and this question, Freud or Jung, whose hand are you on? I don't know either, but
I don't know either of them well enough to, like, if you reminded me of something archetypal about Freud and archetypal about Jung, I'd go, oh, yeah, that's right. But
so
I have no clue the difference between them right now.
So majorly their point of contention was that Freud insisted that we are shaped in childhood. We are shaped very much almost entirely in our childhood. Whatever happens to us, like he said, by the age of 7, probably more or less people are done. Whereas Jung, on the other hand, believed that there is a kind of subconscious mind that is building up inside of us based on every single interaction, and also it is pulling from a more universal kind of consciousness, borrowing from the consciousness of other people, and it's not even other people, it's more like a pool of consciousness, a global or universal pool of consciousness. So that is where they more or less differed and did not agree with each other. Until then they were good friends.
Both.
It's
It's
like, well,
both.
yeah.
It's seriously, you described it beautifully. And if that's how they both portrayed it, it's both. Epigenetics shows us that up till the age of 7, our brainwaves are in theta pattern, which is basically hypnotized. But it isn't external forces that force you to think it. It's us as toddlers telling ourselves the story. You know, mummy yells at you. and as a toddler, do you say, oh, mummy, I know you haven't slept for 3 weeks because I haven't. That's why you're yelling at me. You still love me. It's just that you're tired. No, that doesn't happen. You know, the toddler goes, mummy doesn't love me. My life's over. But if it's traumatic enough, that gets embedded and that becomes the story. I expanded mine because I'm a high achiever. I got the trifecta and I wasn't just going to have the core fears. I told myself I was worthless, not just not worth loving. And I lived in terror until I was about 6 months ago, where I finally had someone say that to me. I've been working with myself the whole time. And I knew I was dealing with the fears, but something inside me hadn't clicked that it was terror. So with the theta pattern, the toddler tells themselves the story. They interpret what goes on around them. They perceive it inaccurately. So there's that element without question. And we're in a collective field. We have to be impacted by the collective field, and we impact the collective field. And you're going to love Paul Celic's stuff if you haven't read it already, because they talk about the collective consciousness and how we all contribute and agree at some unconscious level to everything that we see, including war. And despite the fact, you and I would both say, no, we are absolutely against war, at some collective consciousness level, we are agreeing to it because it's there. I mean, that's a much deeper, that's like getting way, way too deep probably. But so I think it's both of them.
It's both. Yeah, definitely. And I think we're lucky also that today's science is showing us that it's both. Both arguments are correct. Because at that time that they were arguing quite publicly, there was not enough research, like you pointed out. Now we have something like epigenetics, and you have the work of Paul Celic and so many really good scientists who are not just good at understanding the science, but also articulating it.
Yes.
This is new, and we're fortunate. I would really like to, ask you about more book recommendations. Of course, your book, let's say, is at the top of the list. But then, what else would you? So, for example, I've read Personality Plus by Flores Lichard. I've read I'm
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. I'm Okay, You're Okay. Also, is a great book. I've loved Games People Play and The Five Love Languages. Right? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. All are from,
God, how old are you?
of course, all of Robin Sharma and some of Napoleon Hill. But then today, so many books have come out, and it's not just these are books that used to be instrumental earlier when I was in college. I'm wondering if you had to recommend 5 books, for people what would you say? Hey, read these 5 books. Without these 5 books, it's pointless to even go deep into all that science and stuff.
Wow, that's a tricky question. Well, the first book I think of is The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. Have you read that one? He's the epigeneticist. He's amazing. And he's got great YouTube videos as well, called The Biology of Belief. And he's a very entertaining presenter. So without question, that one. Gosh, I used to recommend books, but now everybody's into either YouTube or podcasts. I have immersed myself in the Paul Celic books, the first of which is I Am the Word. But I love the book. I love the final one. It's a very dense book. I've read it twice and I've listened to the Audible twice now. And it's called A World Made New. And there are 14 books, I think, 13 or 14 of his books that I think they're all great. I moved country 3 years ago, then I moved state, and then I moved state, and I've just moved back to Dallas. So most of my books, which I would normally have on a bookshelf somewhere nearby to remind me, are packed away, because I know I have at least 5 that are favorite, and I can see them, but I can't tell you what the names are right now. Influencing with Integrity was a very good basic NLP book, neuro-linguistic programming. And John Gottman is a great relationship writer. He wrote The Seven Secrets of Successful Marriages, I think. And he's very science-based. For example, and I'm just throwing this in because it's a little tidbit, but it's really good. He has a scientific lab called the Love Lab in Washington, Seattle, where he does research, like hardcore research on relationship couples. And if you have, Ellen Langer, she's the other one, Mindfulness. Any of Ellen Langer's books, let me tell you about her in a minute. John Gottman has shown that in terms of optimism and positive psychology, it says 3 positive comments to 1 negative in a workplace generates a positive work culture. So when you're interacting with others, so long as the ratio is 3 positive to 1 negative, it's usually a positive culture. In personal relationships, it's 5 to 1. So you got to give 5 positive comments to your partner or children to 1 negative. You got to do more than in the corporate place. Anyway, Ellen Langer is the most phenomenal, wonderful woman who was the inventor of mindfulness, basically. So if you Langer, the name, and she's a professor at Harvard. I think she's at Harvard. She's either Stanford or Harvard. And she's still doing research. She's like 77. She is outrageously out there and talented and an artist. And I just loved her. Ellen is just there. And she is so present. And I love what she says about mindfulness, because she said it's been misinterpreted in so many different ways. Everybody thinks it's meditation. It's not. It's essentially noticing, being present and noticing. That's being mindful. And she's the one who did the original experiment of, there was a TV program done about it. She took a bunch of old men, I think, in their 70s and 80s. Well, 70s not old, but anyway, in their 80s. And she took them away to a house that she had kind of transformed back to being as if it was 20 years earlier. So they could only listen to radio songs that were 20 years old. And if they had TV on, it was a 20-year-old program. So these people were kind of plonked into an environment that was as if it was 20 years earlier. And she measured all their physiological parameters before they went in. And in 1 week of thinking as if they were 20 years younger, and in the time frame of 20 years younger, every physiological parameter they had improved. And nothing changed except basically they believed that they were 20 years earlier, the environment they were in. So it's not even they believed it. It's just that they had to act in that way, and just acting in that way and not like being immersed in that environment. Isn't that wonderful?
It is wonderful. It is really marvelous, and shows a lot about how easy, or at least how malleable we are, our brains are, our minds are. We all think that change is hard, but actually, science shows that it's not that hard.
Well, yeah. But we perceive change as hard because it's unfamiliar and it's fear-based. Whereas if you choose, there are some people, at this end of the curve, the ABs, they love change. They think, great, life's so boring if we don't have change. Down the F end, it's, no, we can't change anything. It'll be unfamiliar. I'll be terrified.
Do you just trying to connect that question to that point to a question about the corporate? Your keynote speeches are at you've spoken to audiences about very casual things such as men and women and marriage, and even the sex life between them, and all the sort of comedy that can happen there. but also on very serious subjects like how to handle conflict at work, right? I'm wondering, who is more receptive to your message, the leadership or those who are led?
Again, that's a great question. So michaelgrinder.com, Grinder, is, like I said, I think the world's leading authority on nonverbal communication. So he teaches that with all communication, there is content and there is process or process. It's the content obviously has to be relevant, appropriate, up to date. It's a no-brainer. It's the process or the process that's the magic that makes the communication work or the message stick. So that was a complex way of answering the question, but I don't have set speeches. I am in a constant nonverbal conversation with an audience. So depending on who I'm speaking with or to, but it's really with, I will adapt my message and the content and the way I deliver it to make sure that it's a bit like, let's say you were speaking Russian and I'm speaking English. You and I could have a conversation for an hour and have no clue what each other said, but we might, based on our facial expressions and hand gestures, we might get some sense of what mood the other person was in. It's the same when you're in front of a group. And so I will find out what's been troubling that group. So, say it's a group of leaders, and they're dealing with the generation differences and juggling pressure from the senior leadership and the economy and the government with all the people needs below. So then I'll shape that message and I'll use whatever story is necessary to embed the message, because Dale Carnegie said when you're presenting anything, anytime you do any kind of a speech or a interview, you make a point, you tell a story to illustrate the point, and then you let the people know how that point and story are relevant for them. So if you look back through this interview, you'll see that there's a number of times where you ask a question and then I'll go to make a point and then maybe I'll tell a story and then I'll come back to that point to answer the question. But you can change someone's behavior in a heartbeat when you tell them a story that touches their hearts. For example, Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is one of the good books too. And one of his principles is seek first to understand, then be understood, is very good. He talks about getting onto a train one day where he's exhausted and he's going home, end of a day. And this young man gets on at the next station. The young man has 3 little toddlers who are running around the carriage. And it's disturbing Stephen Covey. And, he's... And after about 3 stops, the father of these little children is sort of sitting in a coma. And Covey leans over and says, "Excuse me, can you do something about your children? Because, they're running amok in the carriage." And the young man sort of comes out of the daze and he says, "Oh, yes, look, I'm so sorry. We've just come from the hospital where their mother died." Now, in a heartbeat, what does Covey's behavior do? Instantly changes to one, and probably loaded with guilt, to compassion, where he plays with the kids instead of being annoyed by the children. And that's a wonderful example in so many ways of the ways we can choose to behave. And if with self-awareness, even if the young man didn't tell him the story, even if he didn't talk to the young man, he could look at those children and go, "You know what? I'm tired and they're irritating me, but they're just babies. They're just having fun." So I could choose to look at them having fun and see them playing, or I could choose to play with them. Now, there's 25,000 ways you could choose to behave. But if we cycle back, it's to the self-awareness and the choices we're making and the conscious choices we can make.
True, true. That's really beautiful. And I love that book too, Stephen Covey's Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. When I picked it up, I thought it would be all businessy and, like this, like do this, do that, a bunch of exercises. But it's not. It's so much storytelling and he has so much compassion. And I love that he talks about an example from the Red Indians, the Native American community, where they used to have this culture, at least, the bigger tribes among them, that they would not, when there is conflict and there is conversation between two tribes, they have a stick, right? The chief has a stick, and then they give that stick to the person who's going to speak, and the message is that as long as they are holding the stick, they can speak and nobody will interrupt them, so that they can actually convey their point, right? And when they're done, they hand back the stick to the other person or the chief of the other tribe, and then they speak. And as long as they are holding the stick, nobody interrupts them. Quite a beautiful example from that book that stayed with me.
And it's true, because you think about it, Shajia, humans do better when they have symbols. So I always try to have symbols when I speak. If there's a really important concept, I use a symbol. And I've written that in the book too. So the stick is the symbol to listen. Because without that symbol, humans forget. And we don't really listen. What we're listening for is the gap in the other person's conversation,
So that we can
so
jump
we
in.
can get our point across. Because while the other person's speaking, we're not listening. We're thinking about it. They've said one little thing, and we're going, yeah, but that's not right. I'm going to make sure they understand this about that point. And you're going blah 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 blah, and they go, yeah, but when are they going to stop? And then they listen to the gap, and then poof. And you've been going blah 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 blah, and said 27 different things, but they're still back on that one thing.
It's
So it's a wonderful story, the stick.
It is, it is, it is. Did you know that Dale Carnegie wanted to be a novelist and he tried writing novels all his life and never managed at succeeding at that? That's really the most ironic thing about Dale Carnegie. When I found that out, I laughed myself silly. So
Yeah.
he wanted to be a novelist. Yeah, he wanted to be a novelist and he wrote a novel and he went to his publisher and he gave the book, and that publisher said, I know that you're doing great as an author and a public speaker, but this stuff is just not good enough. You can't make please stick to what you do. But he didn't give up. He didn't give up, and he kept writing novels, and they kept rejecting. The same publisher who was selling hundreds of thousands of copies of his books was rejecting his novels all through his life. And that's just to me
Wow.
was very mind
I'd
blowing.
forgotten that. What does that teach you?
I don't know. I guess it teaches me two things. One is that there are some things that we're all good at, and we shouldn't abandon that side of us, whether there is a business a profit or not. We shouldn't abandon that. And then there is also this other side of us where we may not become commercially successful. We shouldn't give up that either, because he really practiced what he preached, right? He was writing novels even though the publishers were explicitly telling him to give it out, but he didn't give it out. And I really admire that, because he didn't need to. He didn't need to. He could have just stuck to what people would come from across the country to listen to him. He could have just done that and given up on writing novels. But he didn't give up. And he didn't succeed either, right? He didn't succeed either as a novelist. But he didn't give it up either. And I read somewhere that he died in his 70s and he was writing novels until he died. So I think that's really beautiful. The fact that we can be both. We can be somewhat of a failure at things we love doing or that we want to do, and we can be successful at things that that come naturally to us, that we are good at.
Have you written a book? Because I think you should.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Amanda, is there anything that we haven't covered? Because I know, and I apologize that this conversation has been very freewheeling to the point that maybe it was a bit too lumpy and here and there. I was not very organized in asking you
Oh
questions.
no.
But if there's something that you want to talk about that we haven't covered, please feel free.
You know, the only comment I wanted was a couple. How wonderful you've been, and what an impressive young man you are. You're obviously not a new soul. That's very, very obvious. And it was wonderful to have this interview with you. You're just an amazing young man. And the second thing is that FreshLearn has been amazing to work with. I mean, this online course stuff, it nearly killed me to do it. And I do need to kind of revamp it at some stage. But you made the process so easy. And I'm deeply grateful because when you take a big book like that and translate it into an online course that's interesting and isn't just a drag and actually gets results, it's a lot. And you guys really helped, and I'm very grateful. And also to my fabulous um, VP of everything, Mel Collins in Australia. She worked with you guys a lot on it, and she thought you were terrific too.
Oh, thank you
So
so much.
thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It's been a great conversation. I love talking to you. And when my colleague Raghu mentioned your name, I really jumped at it because the moment I went through your website, I said, I want to talk to her.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, I think it's interesting because my speaking has progressed as I learn and develop. It obviously translates into my speaking. And even the last 3 or 4 have changed again because I think I've gotten to somewhat deeper levels, and I can't quite put my finger on what I'm doing differently, but it's very relevant for whatever group it is. So I've just recently spoken to a group of women entrepreneurs, realtors, real estate agents, and senior executives from another company. And the content had certain threads that were similar with all of them, but different things came in. And there's something happening energetically that allows me to get really very deep with people in a corporate context that seems to influence their behaviors afterwards. They walk away with real skills because I've had different feedback. It's lovely. It's interesting, and it's lovely that it's like people are ready to dive in more deeply without it being woo-woo and cosmic, with the science background. But they're ready to, I think people are getting so exhausted and so close to burnout and frustration and uncertainty overload that they want something that's more connected, that's deeper. So it's an interesting shift. On the one hand, there's so much more uncertainty and disconnection, and everything in the culture is disconnecting people, including AI. So there's this deep need for the connection, and I consciously create experiences where I get people to connect within the group, whether they know each other or not. And I feel like just having that experience, well, we know now in science and in the field, it changes things. So they walk away with a different energy, feeling good about themselves, that then lets them change everything else. But they're doing the work. I'm just creating the scene and the environment and the experience. So it's interesting.
That is true. And I'm sure that you all also have a lot of examples of how people have become better, or whether, as people, individuals in their lives or at work or as business leaders. But like you pointed out to me earlier, this may take quite a lot of time to develop, and it's not something that you could measure. It's not something that you could, write down and say, okay, I did this and this was the result. But you're touching the lives of people, right? So the way they change and how that change influences change in other people around them. All of this is going to take a lot of time and may not even come back to you as a report. But you know that you change the guys, and that's really beautiful.
Well, it usually doesn't when you're a speaker, but for the people in the room, they can notice a change instantly because to change your perception takes a heartbeat. To make a conscious choice takes a heartbeat. To recognize fear and choose to eliminate it takes a little longer at times, but sometimes it takes a heartbeat. But there have been some very heartwarming stories where people have come up to me when I'm at an event. And in fact, there was one in Canada a couple of months ago. And a woman came up, two women actually came up. One said, I saw you speak 30 years ago, and I took these ideas home to my family, and now they're family traditions. That was before I started. Then at the end of it, another woman came up and said, I saw you speak 20 years ago, and here's a picture of us together, and here's the CD I bought, and this is what we did with the family. So what I try to do, because if you want people to change their behavior, making it relevant for work is important for the workplace. Making it relevant for the home is the thing that really changes the behavior that changes it for the workplace. So, for example, teaching them about gratitude. And gratitude has been scientifically shown to be so important in so many ways. So I have gratitude glasses that I put on, but I suggest that they begin every staff meeting as a ritual with everyone answering the question, what's the thing you're most grateful for since we last met? Because as they're walking to the meeting, they're thinking about all the things for which they could be grateful. It transforms the meetings, all of them. But you have to make it a ritual. Now, it's not difficult. And then, of course, you need to add humor to most of the presentations. So I put the gratitude glasses, I say, you can put the gratitude glasses on the table. And if someone's going, you just slide the glasses across the table and say, would you like to tell us why you're grateful you've got a job? And of course, everybody laughs, but it's true. And then I say to them, and do this with your children, because how do we teach children gratitude? Mostly we say to kids, say thank you. Say thank you. And then we yell at them. I said, say thank you. But if we go around the dinner table and each child has to answer the question, what's the thing you're most grateful for that happened today? Ultimately, you teach them gratitude. So it's those little things that if you get them to do it at home, they see the value, they're more likely to do it at work. Or sometimes they'll do it at work and then they'll see the value at home. But I will often try to marry all of the skills to not just work, but also home, because that will often embed it more deeply.
You could think of it as the chair behind the chair.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Michael.
Yes, yes, yes. Amanda, this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining the Creator Show by FreshLearn. We are honored to have you, and we really hope that you'll go on to create many, many courses on FreshLearn and create, in turn, many more speakers and writers and givers of joy like yourself. What do you call them? You have a term I forgot.
Joy Buddies and Chief Joy Facilitators, CJFs.
Yes, yes, yes. That's a wonderful term, and we do hope that we can adopt the same kind of philosophy at our workplace too. Thank you so much, Amanda, for your time. It's been great, and really looking forward to seeing more and more of you.
Thank you. And you are astonishing, seriously. Thank you. It was a great interview. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am.